Good evening, good evening. Good evening. Did you fill up on your drinks before arriving, I hope? If you're joining us in Tico Hall, welcome to Florida Conversations. I'm Audrey Chapuis, the brand new CEO of the Tampa Bay History Center. It's so nice to be with you here tonight. To meet so many of our dedicated supporters and members. We have members of the Board of Trustees here, our very esteemed panelists, and this is one of the ways that we can say thank you for everything that you do to support the History Center. Some people describe us as the beating heart and memory of Tampa Bay. So everything that you do to support us, whether that's coming to programs, giving us donations, coming to our annual gala, coming to exhibits, you're upholding that mission and allowing us to continue to thrive, reinvent ourselves, and continue to tell the stories of Tampa Bay. So thank you, and just a round of applause for all of you tonight. Thank you very, very much. And I must say a very special thanks to a few particular supporters who make tonight possible. So this wouldn't be possible without University of South Florida Endowment, USF Libraries, and a gift from Shelley Blood, who's a docent and volunteer. So thank you very much. And how many of you were you able to look at the guitars exhibit and get this fabulous? I'm very happy, and I hope you come back again and again and bring your friends. And that exhibit was made possible by the generosity of the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino Tampa. So thank you for that. And thank you. And a big thanks to our team who makes all of these events and programs and exhibits possible. So bravo to you. And I know there are several team members and docents. If we're wearing badges like this, if you have any questions about how to get involved with the History Center, ask me, ask our Board of Trustees, ask my colleagues. We're always here to help and continue that conversation. So without further ado, I will introduce our Director of Education, Amanda Hoffman, who will introduce our esteemed panelists. So enjoy the conversation tonight.
Well, good evening, everyone. First, just a little housekeeping. We will have time for questions at the end of today's presentation. So if you're joining us via Zoom, we kindly ask that you use the Q&A function of Zoom to enter any questions throughout the program. And for those of you joining us in person, we will have a microphone for you to put your question through a microphone. That way the full audience can hear it. So we just kindly ask that you wait until we bring the microphone to you for questions. For information about other upcoming programs, as you all know, please visit our website, tampabayhistorycenter.org. But now, for our evening program today, I'm happy to introduce our panelists. I'm going to go from your right to your left, so starting with Shawn Kyle. Shawn is the owner of Redwoods Vintage Guitars, located in St. Petersburg, Florida. He has over 25 years' experience in appraising, buying, and selling guitars. At just 23, Shawn discovered a 1960 Gibson Les Paul Burst in like-new condition, valued at over $400,000. Yes, so I'm sure he will talk about that this evening. Since then, he has been factory certified by brands such as Martin, Gibson, Fender, and more, and customers have included members of Bob Dylan and Billy Joel's bands, as well as Neil Young, Vertical Horizon, and many others. To his side is Tad Denham, who is a fourth-generation Tampano and longtime community advocate for music and arts. After a 35-plus year career with Tampa Electric Company, he turned his focus to nonprofit service and music education. In 2022, he joined the Gasparilla Music Foundation, where he manages the Recycled Tunes program that provides instruments, equipment, and repairs for music teachers in low-income schools. Yes. And our moderator for this evening is Ray Roa. Ray is the editor-in-chief of Creative Loafing Tampa Bay, a weekly publication marking 40 years in print and now locally owned for the first time since 2009. Creative Loafing just launched the Tampa Bay Journalism Project, a nonprofit-funded shared newsroom that seeks increased community access to non-paywalled news and information. Creative Loafing covers news, music, food, and entertainment, and the arts daily at cltampa.com. And with that, I will turn things over to Ray.
How's everybody doing today? Nobody brought a guitar tonight. Nobody lifted a... Oh, you did? Oh, okay. Is it in the shade? Okay, good. I didn't want Shawn to have a heart attack. Tad might have a bunch of guitars in his car. I've seen the Gasparilla Music Foundation do its work. In full disclosure, I used to work for Gasparilla Music Festival, ran their social media in the beginning, covered the first press conference as a blogger, and that work is incredible. But let's talk about guitars in the context of this exhibit that's here through the summer, really, through May, I believe. Let's start off here, and I'll start with Shawn. Shawn, we'll go to my left here. Can you tell this room here about your first memorable guitar or musical moment? I'm sure it was even before that 1960 Les Paul.
It's impossible to ignore guitars in contemporary culture as a whole. I mean, guitars kind of took over in the 1920s. They were not necessarily intended to be what they are today in any way, but they took over because they're portable instruments. And for me, I grew up with my parents having a lot of vinyl records and Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, and it's kind of hard to rebel when your parents have cool records. I had nowhere to go. Eventually, I became a touring artist in the music industry. I traveled the country for a long time, but early on, I was actually on tour with a writer from Creative Loafing named Scott Harrell, and he got embedded with my band to go on a tour around the Southeast, and they did a cover story about the band. Well, one of the highlights was stopping in Tallahassee, and there was a fellow named Andy who had a store called Andy's Guitars. Andy was a big man with a big white ponytail, and he had a couple rooms filled with vintage guitars. And I dreamed of getting a 1960s J45, which is an acoustic guitar, similar to what Donovan and one of those artists had. And Andy's guitars had 15 of them from the 1960s. And the first memorable moment that I go back to and I talk to people about when they come in my shop and at trade shows and conferences is I remember going to that store and actually having the opportunity to play a real vintage guitar. And he had so many of them, and one of them was perfect. It looked like it was yesterday, 1964. The paint was perfect, not a crack or a spot on the guitar. And that guitar was maybe $2,800 at the time. This is about 20 years ago. And then there was another guitar just next to it. And it looked like it went through the rapture. It looked like it had been smashed, that beer and cigarettes had been thrown on it, that somebody's ex-wife had tried to destroy it completely and failed. And they had put the entire guitar back together with glue somehow. And it was faded, and it was damaged, and it was absolutely still alive. And that guitar was $4,000. And I looked at Andy, and I'm like, why is the perfect guitar $2,800 and the one that's been through the rapture is $4,000? And he's like, did you play them? I'm like, no. And he's like, kid, go and play them. So this guy lets me, who's obviously on tour with no money, go play these guitars, like the ones that are in this exhibit, literally. And I pick up the perfect one. It's all right. And then I pick up the one that's been destroyed and put back together. And it sounds like the choir of heaven's opening up. Angels are singing. It is the loudest and most perfect damn guitar acoustically I have ever heard. And he laughs and he's like, that's why that one's $4,000, kid. Now, I didn't have $4,000. And Scott told me to buy a guitar amplifier, which I did, which was good because my amp blew up on tour. But
Did Creative Loafing pay for the amplifier?
Creative Loafing, helping convince me to buy amplifiers. But point being is that after that, I realized that there was a huge difference. Even if an antique guitar looks perfect, it doesn't mean that it has a soul or a character or personality. And that stuck with me for the rest of my life and, in a way, shaped a path for me to try to hunt down the guitars that have that soul and personality, which we continue to do to this day.
What about you, Tad? You drive around with guitars all day. You get to hand kids, literally, guitars. You hand them to music teachers. You've seen some pretty magical stuff. I think you were there when Ed Sheeran popped up.
I was not there.
Okay, you missed that one.
I was there, yeah.
What's your first memorable guitar moment when you just got hooked?
I grew up actually playing music. I was in the bands at school, through Hillsborough County Schools. Played drums actually in the jazz band, the marching band, through junior high and high school. And when I finished school, I was like, well, now what do you do with drums? I didn't really have connections with other musicians, so I knew a lot of people that play guitar. And I said, show me some chords, and I bought a very inexpensive guitar and started playing at that time, kind of more playing with youth groups. And most of my guitar playing has been campfire strumming. I'm more of an acoustic player, but I've had a lot of fun doing it. I can sit down and with a group of people for 2 hours and play and sing, and everybody has a wonderful time. So I've been taking more lessons recently, play more electric guitar now, but had similar stories. When you find that guitar, it's not always. I like the guitars that have character to them. That have a story, a scratch here, a cigarette burn, and they typically, there's something more to the sound of a guitar. And I've had 2 or 3 guitars earlier on. My wife gave me a guitar for my birthday, but when I go to a town, I usually stop in a guitar shop, and went to a town in North Carolina and stumbled upon an old Martin, and it's one of those things you picked up and you strum. It's like, oh my gosh, kind of your experience.
Something happens.
Yeah, 0018, 1952, and I bought it. Then I called my wife and told her I bought a guitar, and she was. But one thing I'll say about that, and she's always been very supportive, and I really appreciate my father-in-law telling his daughter, my wife, one time, she said, he told her, buy him 1,000 guitars. And he didn't obviously mean that literally, but what he meant was support his passion and what he enjoys doing. And so I'm not there yet. I've only got a handful, but I've got enough to be happy with what I've got, and I really enjoy it.
Ted, I want to go kind of personal here, and I'll stay with you.
Mm-hmm.
After you retired from Tico, you had a great career there.
Yeah.
How much of you landing at the foundation was happenstance, and how much of it is intentional? I think I've watched you work there the whole time you've been there, and it's a lot of fun to watch you. I've seen your hair grow certain different lengths, and I've seen you in different iterations. Yeah. Why'd you end up there, and why do you stay there?
Yeah, it's been an interesting transition. After I left Tico, I was trying to think, okay, now what? What do I do? I enjoyed music, always have, and was talking to some people in the community, just trying to get some insight. So what do you do when you retire? What are the can I consult? What do I do? And I was talking to a gentleman one day, and I started talking about music, and he looked at me and goes, well, if you like music so much, why wouldn't you do something related to music? And one of those light bulb moments went off for me. And he goes, call this guy. He gave me a card, and it was David Cox, who's the executive director of the Gasper Music Festival. And so I reached out to David and introduced myself, and he at that time needed some of the background that I have at Tico. Matter of fact, I feel right at home here in Tico Hall. It's great being here. But some of the background that I had from a community involvement. And so I started working with David, and one day he said, hey, the guy that ran Recycled Tunes program left. Would you like to come run the program? And so I do that now, and I've been almost 4 years running Recycled Tunes. And if you're not familiar with that, with Recycled Tunes, it's kind of what it says. We collect music instruments from the community, people that have that guitar under the bed, the flute in the closet, whatever instruments they have, we take those in, we refurbish them, fix them up, and then we pass them on to schools. We work primarily with the lower income Title I schools and try to make sure teachers have what they need to serve their students and provide a good music education for them.
Shawn, I'm going to stay personal here. When I bought my first guitar from a shop that you worked at, it was Sam Ash in Carrollwood. I still have that Takamine today. My second job ever was at the Masquerade, which is where the Ritz is now. I was 19 years old, and I worked for Tom DeGeorge doing security at 162 pounds. And one of my first memories was watching the Beauvilles play the Infinity Room there. You were one of the first people to be kind to me when I was at WMNF volunteer in the record library. And I'm thinking about you growing up in Tampa, because you're pretty much from here, 15th Street, Suitcase City. I was going to ask you historically, how do we get to guitar? But now I'm curious, what does a guitar mean for you? Like, you have a life now. We've known each other a long time, but your whole life, your whole existence is because of a guitar. Is that true? Like, what has it unlocked for you?
Well, that's a lot, man.
Sorry, I've never been able to ask you this.
I should have
for
gotten
all
a second
the long
drink.
drives that we've been on. Yeah.
Damn. Okay. I'm going to call my therapist after this, Ray.
No, this is free.
We're going deep here.
Okay. I grew up in a neighborhood that we didn't have instruments in the music program. Like, we still have music in the music program at Shaw Elementary, but it would be like recorders or bells that had been there, they bought. They were like ancient things. But because we had a couple teachers that really gave a damn, it was noted that I had some kind of quick memory or affinity for music. And they encouraged me to join chorus or do these other things that at the time I just wasn't comfortable doing. I was a kid. I had like terrible stage fright when I was younger. And when I got to be in my teens, a bunch of people I knew in school, because this is the 90s, played music. Rock and roll had revived, and everybody on MTV had a guitar. Kurt Cobain took his own life, and the entire cultural world changed in like 1994, through 93, 94. Everything changed. And when I turned 15 for my birthday, my mom took me down to Paragon Music. The Ramore family owned it forever, and later I got to be kind of a mentor to their kids, strangely. Well, aside that time at South by Southwest where I had them kick a dent in the rental car, but I was just trying to teach them how to be rock and roll. Anyway, point being is 15, they got me a guitar. I wanted a piano. And later on, it was noted that I naturally have relative pitch. That is not what they would call perfect pitch, because that would require you being able to do transcriptions by ear. But I'm at the point where if I really wanted to have perfect pitch and sit around with tuning forks, I could. Now, nobody knew that. Nobody would have found that out had there not been a music program. And if Shaw Elementary had not actually hired teachers that gave a damn to kids that weren't necessarily privileged enough to have instruments at home or have money, like my parents didn't have enough money to get a piano. Hell, like they barely had enough money to get me a guitar that would stay in tune. But it was that and a couple friends in the community, like in high school, that played an instrument, which is why I learned at all. And then fast forward 2 years later, I'm graduating high school at 17. I lie about my age, answer a one ad in Focus magazine, go audition and join a band, and I tell them I'm 22, and next thing I know, I'm on the road.
Did you have facial hair?
Huh?
Did you have facial hair?
I could not grow facial hair. And that kicked it off. And like a few years later, I was a little jaded. I wound up getting a job at Sam Ash Music. I literally walked in to buy a bass amp. And Mike Pacelli, who had his own TV show, if you were here in the 80s and 90s, legendary jazz guitar player, he was the manager. And he recognized me for my band being a little popular, and he's like, hey, do you need a job? You're hired. I literally just walked to buy an amplifier. And he's like, you're hired. Come back. Don't be an idiot. And I'm like, I don't know if that's possible. But the next day, I was literally hired. I didn't realize how hard that was or how difficult or how unique that was. 8 months later, I was the top salesman in the entire chain of Sam Ash Music. A year and a half later, I was the de facto vintage appraiser, and they sent me to Los Angeles to potentially take over the Hollywood location, which I had a come to Jesus moment at like 23, 24, and I decided I didn't want to do it. Within a short amount of time, I got a phone call from John Wesley, who later was
Pine Tree.
Nominated for a Grammy,
Sure.
and he needed a lead guitar player that could sing backups, and then my entire life changed. Guitar inadvertently has been a pathway to a completely different life. The only time I go back to Suitcase City is if I want to, hang out at a punk rock venue that's starting now in that neighborhood. But seriously though,
The Wine Up Bar.
It wasn't even just guitar. It was the fact that there were a few school teachers that gave enough of a damn to really advocate for kids that actually showed proficiency in music. And what you're doing is exactly in that line. I respect what you're doing immensely, because that makes a difference and that starts things. In fact, I started late. Like getting a guitar and starting to learn at like 15, 16 is incredibly late. It doesn't normally happen like that. And it takes a lot of more mentoring and opportunities for kids to have that. Did I know that I would have a career that I've had and be nominated for a Grammy and do all the things that I've done? Absolutely not. But if I hadn't had that opportunity, obviously I would not be here right now, for sure. And I don't know what my path would have been. I mean, I know what happened to a lot of kids that I grew up with. I think that's the best answer I can give on that. But Tough question, bro.
Yeah, sorry about that. It just popped into my head. I feel like the last time we had this much time together, we had to stop and pull a turtle off the road. I forget what town we were in. But I was going to stay with you, Shawn, but I want to go to Tad because you talked about the work that he does. Tad, long after I left GMF, I still stuck around, and I've been able to be, like I said, in a lot of these rooms where these kids are able to receive these instruments, but I've also been in a lot of rooms with a lot of music teachers. I remember when I was first doing social media explaining to people that Gasparilla Music Festival was a nonprofit endeavor, that there's only like 4 staffers or something, and recycled tunes. Now. Okay, 2.5?
Right.
Oh, man. I'm going to call the labor department on you.
Yeah.
So thinking about recycled tunes and all those teachers, you see them every day. You have candid conversations with them. Can you talk about the biggest challenges that music teachers are facing in 2026, carrying over from 25 and going forward here into the future?
Yeah, I think one thing is just support for music. One of the things we hear over time is that the arts and music are some of the first programs to be cut, and that's kind of where we try to step in. We also see, and I see it quite frequently when I'm out in schools, the difference between the have and the have-not schools. That's why we focus so much on Title I schools. There are schools that have PTAs and band boosters and folks that are raising money and bringing business sponsorships to their school and providing a lot of money. And there are other schools that don't have any of that. I'll just give one example. I went to school one day, dropped off some instruments, and about 75% of the schools we work with are Title I. Others that are not, but they have a need for some instruments, so we're glad to help them as well. And I looked at I was sitting in my car and looked at the fence out front, and there were about 20 banners of different businesses that had bought a banner. And I went inside and happened to see the flyer that said, here's how much the banners cost. And I figured it was probably $15,000 of banners that were there for that school. And then I went to the next school, and I looked around, and there were no banners in a Title I school. And I actually was talking to the principal, and I made that comment to him. I said, I see the disparity, and there's just the communities that have the parents that have the time to be involved, the businesses in the area that will support a school, and there are others that don't. So that's where I think can make the biggest difference with either providing instruments for those schools, and we work with elementary, middle, and high school. So try to put the instruments in their hands. I hear stories all the time. We primarily worked with elementary schools for quite a while, and then when I started, I realized we get a lot of band instruments that aren't really a fit for elementary. They're more of a middle, high school, and so I talked to the supervisor of the music programs for middle school programs and high school programs. He said, go to this school and talk to this guy. So I went there, and he said, well, our school 3 years ago when I started here had like 20 kids in our band program. He said, now 3 years later, I have 300 kids in our band program, and we need instruments. And so I said, I'm bringing everything I've got to you. And so over the next year and a half or so, I was taking whatever I got that was a band instrument, and guitars and amps and upright bass and everything that we had, just to try to make sure that his students had what they needed. So it's across the board. We do that, day in and day out. And and one thing I want to mention, is a good time maybe to say this, that a lot of people think that. And I talk about the cuts of music and arts, that music and arts are fluff, or that music's kind of nice to have, and everybody likes music, but it's really critical in the development of students. Music brings, just like there's all these sports analogies about all the great things that come from sports, music does that and more. What it does to stimulate children's minds, young students, the confidence they get, the social interaction they get from being part of a band. I was, as I said, I was in the band through my middle and high school days. That was my tribe. A lot of people don't have people to connect with when they're in school, but music provides that resource for maybe someone who's not an athlete or someone who's not, in a fit in another world in the school. So, but the studies galore talk about the benefits of they score higher. People that play instruments or are involved with music programs score higher on SETs. They have a higher chance of graduating high school and a higher chance of graduating, like 3 times higher getting a bachelor's degree if you have music background than if you don't have music background. So it's really critical, the socialization, the mental stimulation, and it's not something that we know from just from research that's been done in recent years. You can go back to people like Plato and Aristotle and look at their quotes and the things that they had to say about how critical music is. And I think Plato said something along the lines that if I had a chance to pick a discipline to study, it would be music. So it's been known for generations and for eons that music is a real critical part of a person's development.
Tad, a quick one before I go back to Shawn. The refurbishing that happens of the instruments is really incredible. I've seen some pretty lousy stuff get donated, and I've seen what comes out.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys do with the really nice guitars that people try to give you?
We've gotten a few nice guitars, and I always, and Shawn, you're probably the same way. When a guitar case comes in, it's like, what's in that? You just never know what it's going to be. And we've gotten a couple nice ones. I'll give an example. We got some cello bows. Now, who would ever thought of cello bows? And I was going to put the cello bows in a cello case and send it out, and I happened to go, we do some minor work on guitars. We put new strings on them. We fix them up. I've actually gotten a little more handy at taking them apart and doing some soldering and fixing some things. But most of the other really repairs we take to either Paragon Music, who still does our repairs for our band instruments. We go to the violin shop, who does our strings. And then we have a couple luthiers we work with that do more broad guitar repairs. Oh, so these cello bows, I took them into the violin shop and said, do these need to be restrung or anything that need to fix up? And he starts looking at it real closely and turning it and looking at it, and he goes, well, these bows are between $1,500 and $2,000 each. I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't stick those in a case and pass them on to a school. But what we're going to do with those is put them on consignment at the violin shop and sell those, and then be able to
refurbish more,
buy more instruments or buy more repairs. So that's what we would do with something that's a higher value item.
Right on. Shawn, I want to kind of come back here to the History Center a little bit as we think about this exhibit. And some of us have been through it already. Some of us will go through it again. Thinking about guitars, you mentioned moving up and be able to appraise vintage guitars. You've handled everything, Bob Dylan, Billy Joel, Neil Young, as we heard. What makes a guitar truly exceptional for a collector or a player? And what kind of things can we in this room notice about the guitars that we see upstairs that would make it exceptional?
That's a great question. For collectible instruments and collectible things in general, there's usually a few qualifications, and those are different depending on the buyer. In reality, there are certain instruments that are intrinsically valuable, like a Stradivarius violin is a masterpiece, even if you get the worst one he ever made. Certain electric guitars are the same way. I was on a phone call on the way here with a collector, and he said he had moved to Tampa from Chicago or somewhere, and that he was in the market for a particular guitar. And what did we have? And this, there's not a lot of shops like that down here. And I kind of went through an explanation of the sort of pieces that we get in from time to time. We just sold a 1952 Les Paul, which is an electric guitar that was designed by Mr. Les Paul, one of the biggest celebrities of rock stardom of all time, even though we're removed from that time period of the 40s and 50s now. But we just had a real one from 1952. That was the first year they were ever made. It had the hang tags in the case. All the electronics were original, and it was a spectacular instrument. And that's one of the instruments I wish I hadn't had to sell. Because it not only was a spectacular blue chip level investment piece, they only made a few hundred of these things. And they later became one of the most identifiable instruments of all culture right now. I mean, if somebody says, think of an electric guitar, you either think of a Fender Stratocaster shape or you think of a Gibson Les Paul shape. And somebody's going to yell, no, a Telecaster. All right, fine, I'm with you. But the point being is that particular guitar affected me because I played appraisable value of millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of guitars, and they're not all spectacular instruments for a player. Some of them have an intrinsic value, but it wouldn't be an instrument that I would take into a recording session. It just doesn't have the thing. And having that personality or that soul to an instrument is a hard thing to identify, especially if you're somebody that hasn't played a lot of instruments. But if you're somebody that's played quite a few instruments, from maybe whatever's available at the local big box store, to a beginner guitar that's assembled in Asia that's kind of clunky, but it makes noise. I mean, that instrument may matter to you more than any value of guitar, because that might be the instrument that gets you going. But after a while, you play different instruments, and you start to learn they have different personalities to them. And to me, the greatest guitar has always been the one that does exactly what you need it to do, when you need it to do it. And for somebody that's a collector, that means a completely different thing than somebody that is a professional player. And that's why you see somebody like Neil Young walking on stage with a guitar he calls Old Black, that's a black Les Paul that looks like somebody's carved a ham on the thing. I mean, it's a gnarly looking guitar, man.
Just
I
a
mean,
step above Trigger.
Yeah. I mean, that particular guitar, however, gets a sound for Neil Young that is totally unique to him, and no other guitar will do. We've had one of those guitars from 1956. I think it's a 56 or a 55. And they're valuable. If there's one that's a mint condition one, it is worth in excess of $40,000 or $50,000 at this point. If there's one that's beat to hell and isn't owned by Neil Young, it's worth less than that. That being said, Neil Young's guitar is priceless because of the music that he's made with it. And it doesn't really matter if it's 100% original, or if the paint's all perfect, or if it's rusty, or it's had changed screws, or if it has knobs that aren't exactly perfect to the year. That guitar is a priceless instrument because of the music that was made with it. So there we have the three different values of an instrument. We have an instrument that's a tool, that's perfect for the job. We have an instrument that's historically relevant and a rare collectible that's perfect. It looks like it's brand new out of the case, or maybe it's a rare color. And then we have an instrument that has an intrinsic value because it's associated with making culturally relevant music. All three of those are totally valid collector's instruments, and different people approach those three things in completely different ways.
I'm interested to know both of your responses to this next question. We're here in Tampa. I think everybody in this room has walked through the Central Avenue kind of area. We've read up on the history of the Scrub and what it means. We look at the Jackson House and we connect it to its history and who stayed there musically and things like that. More recently, we have Doechii, changing hip-hop. Soon to be Gabriel Jacoby will change the way we think about Tampa and its contribution to the soul and R&B world. Tampa Red, we go all the way back there. Morris sound, and then let's not forget the heavy metal, history and just what that means to us here. This is a question for both of you. How would you describe what the Tampa Bay music culture is, and also the influence it's had, in the rest of the world? Tad, I'll start with you. How do you view it?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, it's kind of evolving over the years. I think about those days, the Tampa Red, the Scrub area, the the Central Avenue area, and all the musicians that came through there. The Ray Charles, who wrote his first songs here in Tampa. There was a great panel here actually several months ago talking about that, and all the musicians that came through Tampa from that era, the Chitlin Circuit, and that actually lived here. But it's evolved. I mean, you mentioned Morris Sound and the death metal capital of the world. A lot of you may not know that of the top 20, I may not get the exact numbers, but of the top 20 death metal albums that were recorded, 19 of them were recorded here in Tampa in Morris Sound Studios.
With the same board that Destiny's Child was using too, I think at some point. Yeah, Destiny's Child recorded there as well. All these pop stars.
Oh yeah, and it's a very low key studio. It's been around for probably 40 plus years. I think they just celebrated their anniversary.
Yep, now in Sulphur Springs.
Yep, and now in Sulphur Springs. So they've had a huge impact. So, but we were talking earlier about bluegrass. There's a lot of bluegrass that's come out of the area, and a lot of huge variety of music. Slim Whitman, who's heard of Slim Whitman, the yodeling singer, Hillsborough High School graduate. So a lot of Stephen Stills, came out of Plant High School.
I used to tutor the family years ago that were living in that house. And when I met them for the first time, the dad was like, well, you like rock and roll? And I'm like, okay, where's this going? And he's like, this used to be Stephen Stills' childhood home when he lived here off West Shore.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, it's
and
incredible.
Jim
story.
Morrison, St. Pete, a guy. I mean, so we've had a lot of the Outlaws. If I know, Southern Rock and the Outlaws, they are all, came from Tampa. So we've had a lot of great music that's come from Tampa and gone elsewhere and brought a spotlight to Tampa.
What about you, Shawn, as somebody who's played in bands and traveled and really has a deep appreciation for the folklore around rock and roll? What does Tampa mean to the greater, conversation around music, and what are some things that maybe we're overlooking?
I think that most cities, when people think of the music scene in a particular city, it has to do with what watermarks came out of that city. So traveling out of here, I never did the thing that other artists that were my friends did, which some of them did relocate to, say, Atlanta. And they say they're from Atlanta instead of being from Tampa. I never did that, right or wrong. But I would be met. I remember there was a period of years where I was met in the early 2000s where everybody's like, Deicide, Cannibal Corpses, dude. It was all heavy metal stuff. And then I'd be like, well, I drink with, the singer of Morbid Angel at the Masquerade in Ybor City on Wednesdays when they do metal karaoke, and they'd be blown away. But then after a certain amount of time, it became, oh, that's where the hockey champions are from. Or, oh, the Bucks had a winning year. But
Tom
then
Brady.
after, yeah, exactly. Well, but then after a certain point, it got to be, oh, there's this band, Merchandise is from there. Aren't they from Tampa? Or the conversation's changed partially because I think the ability for people to graze music changed from the 1990s because of having to buy a CD or a cassette, and you really had to commit. And the culture of understanding where music was from and where a certain culture or sound came from became completely accessible in a matter of minutes. And you could become an artist that's from an obscure market and completely change a genre of music. Like there was an artist called Washed Out that, basically created a legendary album in his parents' basement when he was like flunking out of college or something, and it went on to completely revel in. He created a genre called chillwave that sounded like a mix of 70s soft rock and folk and exotica and all these things, to the point where that music is now on television. You hear it all the time, and now we just assume that it's always been there. Do we associate that sound, that hot sound, with Marietta, Georgia, or wherever his parents' basement was? Not necessarily, but I think that there's been a completely overturning of the concept of music has to be from New York or LA. And a conversation I had in the greater music industry, I work now, I own a guitar store and I do that stuff, but I am a talent buyer for music venues. That's technically my current real job, although the guitar store is taken over. A conversation recently was like, well, what bands are from New York right now? Nobody really had any answers, because everything is musically and creatively is no longer required to be from a specific area. And Toeshi is from Blake High School.
Yes.
I mean, and is one of the most influential artists in the world right now, and hasn't ever done the thing, well, I'm from Nashville or I'm from LA. No, they're from Tampa. So I think that moving forward, that prejudice that used to be had, that I ran into coming up in the late 90s into the early 2000s, 2011, 2012, that I noticed that start to change, where people weren't like, you're from Florida. When I was traveling, I mean, you literally got treated like you were not in the first class because you weren't in New York or LA. But in reality, joke's on you, half the bands I'm touring with are from like Poughkeepsie or something. They didn't grow up in Brooklyn. There's no origin story. One of my friends that's here, I think, in the back, present company excluded. But a lot of those bands that moved to New York, they were what we used to call posers. They could afford to go do the thing, and to the point where we're friends, and he's a favorite artist. I'm not going to name names, but he was instructed to move from Tampa to New Orleans to launch his press campaign and career, and they identified him with the city of New Orleans. He was a Tampa dude. He was an intern at the magazine we worked at.
Sure.
So that reality, the industry does what the industry wants to do, and you can't yell at a waterfall. It doesn't care. But at a certain point now, the music industry as a whole, and I think people's public awareness of music as a whole is no longer prejudiced to, oh, well, that has to be from New York. That has to be from Los Angeles. Hip-hop has to be, Southern hip-hop has to be from Atlanta. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. That's completely changed now. It no longer matters. You can be from anywhere, and if what you're making is valid and emotionally relevant for the times, you can start a musical revolution.
We got like 5 more minutes before questions. I want to sneak 2 questions in. Tad, this one's for you, and I want to go across the street to Meridian Fields, which nobody knew what that was called until about December, when the Gasparilla Music Festival decided that was going to be their new home. I've seen Gasparilla Music Festival go through all of it. I've seen them create the model for how to do a music festival in Curtis Hickson and Kylie. I've seen a lot of copycats. I've seen you guys make the move over. I've seen you take the hard decision to take a break. And now we see you at this new spot. Can you talk a little bit about the opportunity that you have there, what you hope happens, and the real challenge? I mean, it might be screaming at a wall here, but I always try to tell people how hard it is to do a festival. How hard is it to do this thing, and what are you hoping happens across the street here in April?
Yeah, it's really hard, especially going to a place that has no infrastructure. We're having to build everything out that we need there. Meridian Fields, no one knew about it because we made up the name, Meridian Fields, because it's on Meridian. I
got duped.
What?
You guys duped me. That's why they call us the fake news. We fall for everything.
Right.
This means he's very good at his job, that he fooled the media.
Yeah. You know, we love being in Curtis Hickson Park, where we were for so many years, and it was a great location for us. COVID came, kind of just put us off our schedule. Issues happened with Kylie Garden that took that away as a space that we couldn't use. It took away 2 of our stages. So, and we really would love to still be there because it's right in the heart of Tampa and the beautiful spires of UT in the background. Moved to Julian B. Lane Park after that, and it was a beautiful park. But you know, part of our goal is always to be in Tampa, in the kind of the core of Tampa. It was really where we wanted to be. And so we started looking at other spaces, and basically our David Cox was on the top of the parking garage right over here.
He's the executive director.
Executive director of the Gasparilla Music Festival, and one of the founders, and looked out and saw that field. And then, if you know what we're talking about, Meridian Road is just right here, and where the old flour mill used to be, and the rail yard that supported that. That's where the festival is going to be this year. And he was on top of the parking garage and looked out, and there's the site. I mean, he saw that and started just having discussions and talking to people that own the property. And SPP, who owns a lot of the Water Street and does development here, owns part of the property to the south on Cumberland. Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority owns a bigger part of it, the big grassy area. And we're real excited that they both have come on board and said, yes, you can use our space. And it's been a long road in making a plan and putting it together, but they're working very closely with us to make sure the space is, the field is prepared and ready to go. But then there's just a lot of building the infrastructure and bringing the bands in, and we're excited about the lineup. If you guys, who's seen the lineup? We have a really good lineup, and if you've not been to the Gasparilla Music Festival, I will tell you, it's really very worth going to. And a lot of times people say, oh, I don't know the bands, or I only know a couple bands. That's the good thing about it. If you don't, that means if there's 50 bands on the lineup and you know 2 of them, that means there's 48 other bands that you can learn about, and you may find your new favorite band there. So we pride ourselves on, yeah, right. I mean, you know, and that's when I started going to the Jazz Fest. I didn't go to see the headliners. I went to see Rock and Dopsy and the Radiators and you know. Subdues and all those guys who you would not typically, I would not have gone, other than some friends say, oh, this is a cool band. So, you know, I encourage people to drag their friends who may not know the bands. You know, we pride ourselves on a diverse lineup. We have local, regional, and national talent. Actually, this year, international, we have a band from Cuba. Sema Funk is coming back again. He's one of the
awesome
James Brown in the flesh, I believe.
He is.
Yeah,
the Cuban James Brown.
It's
really one of the most high energy bands you will ever see. But you know, we have great headliners. But everyone from the opening acts to the headliners are great, and they represent different genres from rock to bluegrass to almost any genre you can think of. I mean, we've got some great. We've got some DJs that will be playing. One of the things we've experimented with the past couple of years has been a real success for us is having DJs. And on Friday night of the last GMF, we had one of the best nights around, just super energy. So there's something for everybody. But in addition to the music, it's a festival feel. It's the music, not only the music, but the food. We have great restaurants, local restaurants. We pride ourselves on having local restaurants, and they come out and they'll create a special menu item just for the festival. So food's great. The art, the ambient pop-up music, or pop-up artists that are around, marching bands may come through, or a drum line from elementary school will come through. So there's just something new and exciting all the time. Artists that will be doing live music painting. We also have a kids fest. So most of our festival has always been within the bounds of the festival. But because of this unique location here, we are doing some music outside of the festival. So Sparkman Wharf, if you're familiar with that, right over here, GMF does all the music programming down there. So on Friday and Saturday nights, we program all the music. So we're going to be programming music on that stage as well, and that'll be free for folks that want to come down and check that out. We also have a kids fest that will be on the Sparkman Wharf area from 12 to 3, where parents can bring kids out and have kids activities and kids music and arts and hands-on. We have an instrument petting zoo where kids can pick up a violin and play a violin, or try to play a violin, or beat on a drum or strum a guitar, and it may be the first time a kid touches an instrument, and that may spark a kid to say, "Oh, Mom, can I get a ukulele?" And she never. One of the things I always really enjoy about what we do, and I haven't seen the payoff yet, but that what's going to happen with that kid when he grabs that ukulele, and where's he going to go with it? Like a Shawn, had an instrument, and all of a sudden you're touring the world playing. Where is that kid going to go with it? And I can actually we'll share an anecdote. I know we only have a couple minutes, but we had some kids come over this week from Blake High School, and we were talking to them about some instruments. And one of the guys was a trumpet player, senior at Blake High School. And the kids that are at Blake are some of the top players around. I mean, that's the music and arts school in Hillsborough County, and don't know how it came up, but he mentioned that he first put his hands on a trumpet in 5th grade through another nonprofit that we work with quite a bit called Instruments of Change, and they provide instruments to kids, and the kids, through being part of their program, can actually earn an instrument. They don't give them an instrument, but they have to earn the instrument through achieving certain things. And this kid earned his trumpet that he got in 5th grade, and now he's a senior in high school, and he's going to be pursuing music beyond high school and probably for the rest of his life. So those are the kind of little nuggets that we hope that, creating that access, putting an instrument in a kid's hand is going to create that kind of opportunity and that kind of trajectory, and who knows where he might go.
Shawn, you get the last word here. This is, we're talking about guitars. Maybe some folks here would be inspired to go purchase a guitar here soon. How does somebody know when it's the right? I think you've kind of hit on this, right? But if you don't know what your guitar needs to do for you, how do you know that it's the guitar that you should buy if it's your first guitar?
The first thing that I normally say, especially if it's a younger player, is I ask them who their favorite guitar player is. Because you can teach a lot of things, but teaching inspiration is damn near impossible. If somebody's inspired and they have it in their head that they think Jimi Hendrix is the coolest thing ever, buy a Fender Stratocaster. Or an affordable version that looks the same and is 90% there. It used to be, and this is going back quite a ways, and it is a cultural thing, but it's also an educational thing, that going back quite a ways, guitar was originally a folk instrument. It was never intended to be taught in the way that it's taught. It actually doesn't fit in with standard sheet music. It's written in a completely different register. A guitar can change 6 notes at once, whereas violins usually only play 1 or 2 notes. I remember getting picked on in high school because I couldn't read music. And then it took a decade to realize that that was absurd because the guitar can change 6 notes at once and has 4 or 5 of the exact same C note in 4 or 5 different places. And a trumpet plays 1 note and has 1 middle C. I'm not saying that guitar is a difficult instrument. It's actually approachable. How you know what the right instrument, especially when it relates to the guitar, to you, I think has to do with the kind of music that you want to play. Don't get a classical guitar if you don't ever intend on playing classical guitars. They used to force that on students because teachers that graduated through an educational system were only really validated by classical music. I remember being a kid and finding a Beatles textbook from the 60s. All the chords were wrong. If you played them correctly, it sounded nothing like the actual Beatles music, and maybe that was because of copyrights or maybe because it had a classical approach to it. Either way, now things are different. If somebody wants to get into education for music, there are a ton of opportunities to do so. And also, music's never been more approachable because there are lessons with charts and all different levels of instructors on YouTube for free. Although paying for lessons is great. We love that too. But finding the right guitar for you is pretty simple. A budget for a guitar can be as little as $150 for a reliable instrument that plays well. I will say beware of the stuff that you buy on Amazon. Beware of the stuff that's like the mail order, sight unseen kind of thing. It would be better to find a local shop that has a good reputation that you trust. You know, my shop's cool. We love your business. We only carry a handful of beginner guitars at any given time because we're surrounded by schools. That's not really our bread and butter on what we do. But I make sure that we always have maybe 6 or 7 pieces just in case a beginner or a kid comes in or somebody that's on a budget. Not every shop sets up guitars, and that's a valid part of it as well. So you do want to get an instrument that's easy for you to play. You can do some research online and see if it's damaged or if the strings are too high or something like that. But the first thing I advise is just find something that you love and never leave it in the case. Ever. If you put it in the case, it ceases to exist. I've found guitars that are 80 years old that have spent their entire lives in the case. Good for the vintage guitar, sure. Bad for the player. You want to leave it out. You want to put it on a stand. Put it in the corner of the room. Make it a piece of art. You see it all the time. It fires you up. You go, you pick it up. Then you're going to want to play it. And if you have that instrument, chances are you actually will learn how to play. And that is the right guitar for you.
Awesome. I think Amanda has a microphone. So if anybody has questions, we'd love to hear them and answer those as well.
Thank you. We've heard about a lot of wonderful musicians tonight. I don't know that I've heard the name of one woman, but I'd just like to mention from the Tampa Bay area, Christy Lene is one of the best guitar players I've ever heard.
I met her when she was 15. We played open mic nights together. And I knew then and there she was a badass, and she was going to have a whole career in music.
She is.
Another Blake kid.
From Blake High School.
I mean, but there are a lot of musicians in the Tampa Bay area now who are great musicians. Rebecca Zapin, Rebecca Pulley, Betty Fox, who's, I think, moved away recently. But so many women musicians. I guess I just want to say, you know, highlight the women sometimes. I think they get overlooked, and they're great women musicians.
Yeah, I'd agree. There
Good
was
point.
Oh, and Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
Yeah.
And Girls Rock St. Pete.
Yes, yes.
Molly Tuttle. There's a lot of great guitar players, female guitar players out there these days.
Siobhan Philidor comes to mind.
Yeah, she's
one of
badass.
my absolute favorite drummer that lives here is Natalie DiPergola.
Yeah,
She's absolutely incredible. Used to play on Art Blakey's old sets.
Yeah.
And give a shout out to my kid sister, Jerry X, as well.
Yeah, Jerry X, we love.
And I'll also say keep an eye out for Judy Ann Jackson. She's 17 years old. She played her first GMF at 10 years old. And she's about ready to graduate from high school and go off to school to study music. So keep an eye out for her.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, though.
We've
Yes,
hung out
another
with
one.
John Lamb, dude. It's all right.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Flex.
I just want to thank you guys very much for everything you're doing at Gasparilla Music Fest. All the bands you guys bring. Every time I go, it's a fantastic time. And thanks so much for the instruments that you guys distribute.
Thank you.
Quick shout out there before I ask my question. I love the guitar. Guitar gets me out at night. You know, Wishbone Ash is playing tonight in Largo. I wish somebody was driving me there. I don't think, but my question is, I saw an article in the Tampa Bay Times just maybe 2 weeks ago. The crucial thing is, it's great that you guys are getting the instruments out there, but the kids have no place to play. We used to go see the Blake High School Jazz Band, rotating band, different guitarists every week, different horn sections, and they closed down, and we're just really having a hard time finding place for these musicians to find access where they can play.
Well,
I guess,
I can tell you about one that's been recognized. A friend of mine, some of you may know Melissa Grady, who's a cellist and a music teacher and a performer in the area. She realized that she has a young daughter who playing in an all-girls band called Boycott. They started when they were 12 years old, and now they're seasoned musicians at 15 and 16 years old. But she noticed the same thing for her daughter. They didn't have a place to play. So she called me up one day and said, hey, I got this idea. I want to start a nonprofit, and we're going to call it Emerald Onset, and we're going to create an open mic night space for kids to come out and perform. So on the fourth Saturday of the month, if you have no young kids that want to have an opportunity to play their music or sing their song, to come out to the Corner Club on Sly Avenue. And there's a great little stage space in the back. And we have a open mic night, and it could be a singer-songwriter playing a guitar. Could be a full band that come out and play. And the first time we had that was like 3 months ago, so it just is brand new. There were a couple of young girls there that kind of looked at each other and was like, hey, do you know this song? Let's get up and do the song together. They had met that night and just got up there and did a song together. So those are the kind of things that are just spontaneous or really kind of cool. So that's been recognized, and we're working on it.
And I would add, too, that there are these jams. I'm thinking about the Hangar in St. Petersburg has a great Monday night jam. Samara Joy popped up there 3 weeks ago because most of her band are alum of Gibbs High School. And then I think Shawn and I were kind of talking about this. There's actually a lot of places to play music. Corner Club's there, Shuffle. There's a great jazz jam with Rod Arnold. I can never say his last name, at New World Brewery. There's a dive bar in Nebraska getting into experimental electro just in St. Pete. You know, Sweet E is out there, 7C. Crooked Thumb on Tuesdays has a great folk night.
Noisemakers has an entire
Gabe Whitney's Noisemakers are incredible.
Outlet for the student bands and the kids to play. And recently, I've been bringing in, since I was running the Floridian, School of Rock, the Scamato Music School. I recently hosted Ladies Rock St. Pete at Bayboro at one of those.
And they have a great open mic as well. I think at the Chataway, maybe.
Yeah, Chataway has open mics, and it's accessible to all. I think that there could be more advocacy for that, for sure. When I was coming up, I think we've lost a lot of venues. That's a panel for another time.
Sure.
But there could be more advocacy, I think, to find a way to make that more accessible to younger players, an atmosphere that isn't just a smoky bar or something. You know, me coming up, I was lying about my age and playing all those smoky bars. But it was blues music. But that being said, like right now there are outlets for that. But unfortunately, the only downside to it is I think that they're more aimed at the pre-organized music schools, especially the ones that are kind of pay for the music school kind of thing. And I'm not seeing a lot of that freeform thing that I used to run into when I was like 16, 17, like the coffee shop open mics that were early and accessible to all ages. And if you want to go up and make a fool out of yourself singing David Bowie, you were allowed to. I think that there definitely could be more of that, but yeah, I know Melissa Grady was working on that, and that's going to be a great series.
Any other questions?
Silly questions are okay too.
And I will say, if you're looking for a venue, Creative Loafing does a music week. We have for the last, I don't even know, before I got there. And we try to write about every single venue popping up, sadly closing down. And I think there's a lot of places to go experience music. And I think part of it's letting our kids hang out late, picking them up, and being okay, I think, with them hanging around. Not all musicians are bad. Like, it's not all bad stuff. Like, it's not all bad stuff that happens in a bar. I think I grew up a lot working in bars and being around music, and I think sometimes we have to trust our kids to go do the thing, because most of our kids are pretty good. Not all your kids are good, but most of them are. Yeah, or go with them if they'll let you.
Yeah.
Great. Good, Amanda. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
all. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
Sorry, Chairman?